What is going on, guys? Nathan here with another Magic the Gathering video. In this video, I wanted to showcase my budget Karador deck, which is black, green, white, the colors of Abzan. And this is a budget version of the deck, meaning that the super expensive versions of cards are not included, and altogether it will cost around $80. The reason, actually, I would like to say that from here on out, probably most of the Commander decks that I'll go over will be sort of budget versions, or at least under the $100 mark, because every time I'm browsing on Tapped Out, I always think that you might see this really cool deck on the front page, it just looks super cool, but then you scroll down and you look at its total cost and it's, $1,000 plus. So it's like, decks like that I can't really take seriously because your casual player, the majority of Magic players, are not going to be able to afford that deck. So from here on out, for not only the purposes of providing a realistic deck that you could buy, but also for me, for myself creating a deck that I could personally buy, these decks will definitely be under the $100 mark, and this particular deck will cost around the $80 mark. Now, immediately you can actually take $10 off of this price because I have included Wormcoil Engine in this deck. And Wormcoil Engine is the most expensive card in the deck, and you can easily remove him to decrease some of the price. But the reason I did that was because Wormcoil Engine is actually very accessible. If you either bought the Red Commander 2014 deck, you can actually make money off of the Red Commander 2014 deck because Wormcoil Engine, in addition to around 3 or 4 other cards, put the value of those individual cards is around the $25 to $30 mark, and you actually can buy the Red Commander 2014 deck for about $26. So you are literally getting free cards if you were to buy just a bunch of those decks. Now, you can either, a lot of people buy the Commander decks, so you can either sort of import this card from that deck if you happen to own it, and sort of swap between the two, or you can actually just buy the Red Commander 2014 deck for this card individually, and then you can actually have the value of a bunch of other cards. So anyway, if you don't have Wormcoil Engine, that's totally fine. You can take that out and replace it with an equivalent 6-cost creature or whatever you might want to do. So this deck is Abzan colored, and its general is Karador, Ghost Chieftain. Now, to me, Karador is one of the best generals in EDH, in my opinion, and that is because he opens up so many options in terms of how you can build your deck around him. So he is a 5 colorless black, green, white cost. He's a 3/4, so he doesn't die to a lightning bolt or any sort of average 3 damage spell, but ideally you should actually be able to keep recasting him if he keeps dying, because he costs 1 colorless less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, and during each of your turns you may cast 1 creature card from your graveyard. Now, what this means is that because this deck is so creature focused, there are 59 creatures in here. If this thing would go back, I'm trying to, here, let me manually, it's still loading. Okay, so it's just the internet is a little bit slow. The thing about him is that there are 59 creatures in this deck, and the deck is focused around interacting with your graveyard, having your creatures pass between those two zones. So, even, at turn 5 or turn 6, you should ideally have around 3 to 4 creature cards in your graveyard, just because of how the deck works, between sacrificing and ramping and stuff like that, where you should be able to cast your commander, Karador, very, very easily. And in the late game, you should have just a plethora of creatures in your graveyard, to the point where you will almost always be able to cast them for 3 mana. The downside to that is, of course, that you need those 3 different colors, but the land, I have very basic lands in here because that's sort of the whole aspect of being budget. You can't really spend a lot on the land, and plus I don't like to invest my money into land in the deck anyway. But anyway, the point is that Karador you will almost always be able to cast for very cheap, and he is definitely a crucial tool to the deck. And that sort of synergizes very well, because you're going to need him on the battlefield, and he's very cheap to cast, so that's awesome. Anyway, so he unlocks a variety of things that you can do with your deck. A lot of this stuff has to do with I've sort of split the creatures into 4 categories. There's sort of 4 things that you can do. You can so basically have really large cards, sort of the muscle cards is what I like to call them. So they're creatures like Ghoultree, where, Ghoultree costs 1 colorless less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. He's a huge 10/10. There's also cards like Nemesis of Mortals, and I will go over each card individually. I just want to sort of lay this out before we get into the nitty gritty. Nemesis of Mortals is a 5/5, but its monstrosity is very cheap, so he's you can kind of consider him to be a 10/10 with his monstrosity ability. And then cards like Bonehorde. So there are 4 non-creatures in the deck, and the reason, like, I originally set out to make this deck to be creature only, but these 4 cards I think are too valuable to pass up, so I'm kind of cheating a little bit with my whole creature only rule. So instead I said, okay, this is going to be majority creatures. But anyway, the 4 categories of creatures are like muscle creatures, creatures that will basically win you the game when you need the extra power, creature removal, so cards like Shriekmaw, non-creature removal, that's targets like artifacts and enchantments, or just non-creature permanents. And then the fourth category is card draw. So things like Soul of the Harvest. I had Primordial Sage in here before, but I did remove her. I don't remember why, but there's a good reason for that. Anyway, I'll go over the 4 non-creature cards first, sort of explain why they're there, and then I'll go over the creatures. And for that, I'm going to sort by converted mana cost, because I feel like that'll actually just sort of lay out the creatures better, being they're all of the same type. Anyway, so our artifacts. So there's 3 artifacts. So we've got a Bonehorde. So this is an equipment equipped for 2. Equipped creature gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. This is obviously going to synergize with our strategy very well. Not only are there going to be a ton of creature cards in our graveyard, but that also counts opponents' graveyards as well. So this is going to be some huge muscle in your deck. That X can get up to 12, 13, even 20 if you're lucky in certain scenarios. So something getting like a +20/+20, while that may be somewhat exaggerated, is still definitely viable and might happen. Conjurer's Closet is going to be 5 cost. At the beginning of your end step, you may exile target creature you control, then return that card to the battlefield under your control. Now, a lot of because your creatures are going to be moving from zone to zone, from your graveyard to the battlefield, I did include a lot of cards that have enter battlefield effects, and Conjurer's Closet will help to trigger those again. So my best example here is something like Armada Worm, because when Armada Worm enters the battlefield, you can put a 5/5 token with trample onto the battlefield. Now, if you go ahead and play that, and then you have Conjurer's Closet on the field when you end your turn, then at the beginning of your end step, you essentially get another 5/5 trample. So it's stuff like that where you can synergize with that very well. Skull Clamp, equipped creature gets +1/-1. I mean, a lot of people know what Skull Clamp does. I guess I'll explain it anyway. Whenever equipped creature dies, draw 2 cards. I included this because not only is Skull Clamp just very good in general, but you're going to have a lot of sacrificing, so your creatures are going to be dying a lot, and you could equip for 1, and that's going to be a lot of card draw, because drawing those 2 cards is absolutely crucial. And yeah, so those are artifacts, and the other instant that I have is Wake the Dead, and the reason that I have this is simply to either defend against tokens or proc your enter the battlefield effects. So, for example, if Armada Worm is in our graveyard, and somebody's attacking me with 10 1/1 soldiers, then I can go ahead cast Wake the Dead. And I might bring Armada Worm back to have a permanent 5/5 creature that won't die because it's part of the enter the battlefield effect, and stuff like Brutalist Exarch. If I flash him back using Wake the Dead, then I can go ahead and use his ability, and it just synergizes very well, Grave Titan, and so forth. Very good defensive card, but also you can use it offensively as well, because you don't have to be... I mean, you're supposed to cast it on an opponent's turn, and that opponent doesn't have to be attacking you, so you can just use that anytime that you actually want. Okay. And then we'll now get into the creatures. So I'm going to go ahead and sort by converted cost. Okay. Actually, let me go over land really quick. So Part of having a budget deck means that you can't spend a lot on land, and I don't like spending a lot on land anyway because I feel like it's sort of a waste of money. But I have 15 forest, 4 plains, 10 swamps. You can see this mana distribution is pretty good. Blossoming Sands for a green-white gain life. Evolving Wilds for basically you can search for a specific color that you might not have. Golgari Guildgate, black-green, Grey Pelt Refuge. All of these are very cheap. Jungle Hollow, another life gain land. Sandstep Citadel, Triland, and then Celestia Guildgate is going to produce green-white. So very easy land order, and I am very comfortable with that. I feel like that doesn't... Oh, should I need to redo this? Okay, converted cost. Okay, so onto the creatures. Your 2-drops and 3-drops are going to be mostly mana-producing creatures. And these are going to help you fill your graveyard because a lot of them are sacrifice effects. So Dawn Treader Elk, pay 1 green to sacrifice it, search your library for a basic land card, put it on a battlefield, tap, shuffle your library. Basically a rampant growth, and you've got a creature card in your graveyard that'll help you ramp into your commander. Hermit Druid, the classic OP as shit creature. You can pay 1 green to tap or reveal cards from the top of your library. You basically get a basic land card. And you can keep doing that over and over. Kasali Pride Mage. Kasali Pride Mage is actually going to be a non-creature removal card. So you can pay 1 to sacrifice it, and you can destroy target artifact or enchantment. It'll be another creature in your graveyard to help you ramp into your commander. Sakura Tribe Elder, it's essentially a rampant growth that you can do at any time. She's pretty amazing, or he, I'm not really sure. You can sacrifice him to search your card for a basic land card, put it down on the battlefield tapped. Satyr Wayfinder, when he enters the battlefield, reveal the top 4 cards of your library, and you put a land card from among them into your hand, put the rest into your graveyard. He's going to fill up your graveyard, because you are most likely going to get a bunch of creatures in this 4-card reveal. That will help you ramp into your commander, and it'll help you find some land. Viridian Emissary, 2 cost 2/1. When it dies, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it on a battlefield, tap, then shuffle your library. Wake the Dead, that is a spell that we already discussed. Okay. Okay, so Bone Shredder, 3 cost 1/1. When it enters battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. So what's great about certain creatures like this, like Bone Shredder, like Shriekmaw, is that you can actually use it to almost threaten / blackmail your opponent. Because if you have something like a Shriekmaw in your graveyard, which is essentially the same thing as Bone Shredder, you can actually evoke it for 2 if it's in your graveyard. So let's say it's in your graveyard, you control your commander because he's going to be super cheap. You can evoke it for 2 and kill any creature on the board. So essentially you almost always have like this 2 mana kill spell at your disposal, which is pretty awesome. But Bone Shredder is pretty cool because you get that destroy spell effect, and then its echo cost will allow you to sacrifice it right away. It'll go into your graveyard, help you ramp into your commander. Burnish Heart, 3 cost, you can pay 3 to sacrifice it and search a card for 2 basic land cards that don't need to share a type, so you can get 1 of each color if you want, and put them on a battlefield tap, then shuffle your library, he goes into your graveyard. Fierce Empath is a 3 cost. He's going to be a tutor effect. So if he's in your graveyard and you control your commander, you can keep recasting this guy over and over. Maybe you have Conscious Closet. You keep flickering this guy to tutor your library for a creature cost with 6 or greater. Put it in your hand and shuffle your library. Pretty great card. Fleshbag Marauder is going to get around Indestructible. It's a 3 cost 3/1. When it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Now you can sacrifice Fleshbag Marauder, so you can actually get around certain cards that might have hexproof, certain cards that might be untargetable for whatever reason, are indestructible, stuff like that. He's not as good against tokens because your opponents will choose to sacrifice a certain creature, but it'll help against the really, really big guys where your opponents might only control 1 or 2 of them. Mirror Entity is going to be a nice muscle card. 3 cost 1/1. You can pay X where creatures you control become XX and gain all creature types until end of turn. He's going to be definitely a late game winner for you. Night Howler is a 3 cost enchantment creature with Bestow, where Night Howler and enchanted creature each get +X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So imagine that he is essentially Bone Horde, except he's a Bestow creature. Now if you bestow him for 4, let's say you have 10 creatures are in all graveyards. You're going to give a creature +10/+10 for 4 mana, and even when that creature dies, the bestow creature actually becomes a creature itself. So you're still going to have to deal with a 10/10 creature after that creature where it's enchanted dies. So that's insanely good. I had to include Night Howler in this deck. You have Maya Elder. When it dies, you may search the library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal and put them into your hand. If you do, shuffle your library, and you can pay 2 to sacrifice to draw a card. Again, another card that'll fill your graveyard. You have a Maya Granger, 3 cost 2/2 with an Echo. When it comes into play, you may search your library for a basic land card, put that card on battlefield tapped, and its Echo cost will allow you to sacrifice it, then be put into your graveyard. Now, those are most of the sort of rampy type of creature costs, or creatures. So here we get into the more utility / muscle creatures. So Body Snatcher is essentially a 4-cost where you, as it enters the battlefield, you discard a creature card from your hand, so that card goes into the graveyard. Once Body Snatcher dies, that card from your graveyard goes onto the battlefield. So if I'm holding something like a Ghoul Tree, a very high cost creature, then I can actually play Body Snatcher for 4, put Ghoul Tree into my graveyard, which will help me ramp my commander if I want to play him. But then once Body Snatcher dies, essentially I swap him with Ghoul Tree, and I just played a Ghoul Tree for 4 mana. So that's kind of the utility of Bone Snatcher, or Body Snatcher. Bone Horde Artery, whenever they... Brawn, a 3/3 trample for 4, as long as it's in your graveyard, and you control forest creatures, you control have trample. This is a card that's just sort of meant to sit in your graveyard and help out your own creatures. He's a nice body to have in your graveyard, as ironic as that sounds. Disciple of Bolas, 4 cost 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, sacrifice another creature. You're going to have a plethora of creatures available to you, so that shouldn't be a problem. You gain life and draw X cards, where X is that creature's power. So even if I wanted to sacrifice something like a Brawn, because I want Brawn in my graveyard, then I'm going to gain 3 life and draw 3 cards, which is pretty decent. Pulse Prophet, 4 cost 2/2. When it's put into a graveyard from the battlefield, exile all creatures. Now, this is useful where essentially once it's in your graveyard, you can almost threaten a board wipe every turn, because you can actually replay this guy from your graveyard and sacrifice him somehow, or have him run or sort of defend against other players, and they're not going to be attacking you because they know that if you defend with a False Prophet, he's going to take out literally all of their creatures, including yours, but still, it is definitely worth it to have a board wipe at your disposal. Gerard Golgari Lich Lord is 2 black, 2 green, so he's pretty high cost in terms of the colors that he demands, but he's very powerful, and then he gets +1/+1 for each creature card in your graveyard. So that's obviously going to be in the higher numbers, like we discussed before. Maybe there's 8 to 10 creature cards in your graveyard, and you can pay 3 to sacrifice another creature, so he's another way to get cards into your graveyard. Each opponent loses life equal to the sacrificed creature's power. That's very powerful as well. And you can sacrifice a swamp or forest to return it from your graveyard to your hand, which I don't know if you necessarily want to do unless you're out of mana. Lurgoyf is a 4 cost where its power is equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards, and the toughness is equal to that number +1. So again, this is one of the muscle creatures. You're going to have a lot of creature cards in your graveyards. He's going to be a very, very powerful creature. Mortivore, power and toughness equal to the number of creature cards in all graveyards. Again, another muscle creature with regenerate as well. Necrotal is another sort of creature removal spell, so 4 costs 2/1 with first strike. It doesn't really matter, but his effect is that when he enters the battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-black creature. That creature can't be regenerated, so you can keep flickering him to keep just destroying creatures if you have something like a Conjurer's Closet out. Nilia, God of the Hunt, is one of the options in the deck that I think you could remove to make it a little bit less cost. I included it mostly because I'm really a fan of Trample, and I like getting damage through my opponent's creatures. But essentially, she gives other creatures Trample, and you can pay a bunch of mana to give certain creatures +2/+2. And the main reason why I included her, I guess, besides the Trample effect, is that she's a 4 cost 6/6 indestructible. And I think because you have so many creatures, you can have a lot of creatures on the battlefield, meaning that your devotion, especially to green, is going to be a lot, because essentially if you look at these mana costs here, it's going to be half green in this entire deck. So chances are you might actually be able to get her into creature form and attack with a 6/6 indestructible, so that's pretty great as well. Sewer Nemesis is a 4-cost, enters the battlefield, choose a player, its power and toughness equal to the number of cards in the chosen player's graveyard. Again, synergy, but you're probably going to want to choose your own graveyard, and whenever the chosen player casts a spell, that player puts the top card of his or her library into his graveyard. So it's going to start feeding your graveyard, and you want that, but make sure not to deck yourself out, because you can sort of do that pretty fast. Especially if you're going to be casting creature cards from your graveyard as well. You might be casting 2 or 3 spells a turn. Slum Reaper, whenever it enters battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature. Again, you can sacrifice Slum Reaper to keep activating this effect, and you can kind of abuse that too. But it is a 4/2, so it might take out some lower power/toughness creatures. Acidic Slime is sort of a classic green card. Death Touch 2/2 for 5. When it enters battlefield, destroy target artifact, enchantment, or land. So another non-creature permanent type of removal. Archon of Justice. When it dies, exile target permanent. So basically, this is a card that you can abuse to sort of sacrifice, and you can exile permanent at your will if you keep flashing it back. And this is going to be another one of those creatures that might deter opponents from attacking you, because if this thing dies, you get your choice of what you get to exile, so that might not work out so well for your opponents, essentially. Conjurer's Closet, we already went over that. Endrick Sahir Master Breeder is a 5-cost 2/2. Whenever you cast a creature spell, which is pretty often because this is a majority creature deck, put X 1/1 tokens essentially on the battlefield, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. And when you control 7 or more thralls, sacrifice Endrick Sahir Master Breeder. So this serves 2 purposes. First of all, you're going to get good value by having a lot of tokens. It's going to give you a lot of token defense, because if somebody attacks you with 20 tokens, it'll help a lot to block those smaller guys. Second of all, you actually get to once you control 7 or more thralls, which will probably happen because you're going to be ending up casting a lot of creature spells, you sacrifice the card, meaning that he goes into your graveyard to help you ramp into your commander. So he serves that purpose as well. Garruk's Pack Leader, a good card draw card for this deck. Whenever another creature with power 4 or greater enters battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So that's going to be, you might be able to flicker a bunch of creatures, and essentially this guy should, in theory, allow you to draw a bunch of cards. Karametra, God of Harvest, I'm not really sure how to feel about her in particular, but she's essentially going to allow you to ramp into a lot of mana, where you can start casting a lot of creature spells, both from your graveyard and in your hand. Essentially, you're always going to have 1 or 2 to even 3 or 4 options of creatures that you can cast with or out, no matter their cost. Because every time you cast a creature spell, you can essentially search for a forest or plains, put it on battlefield tapped. So with her out, you get a lot of land, and that's definitely good in this deck, where you're going to want to cast multiple creature spells every turn. Karmic God is a 5-cost 2/2 flyer with Echo, so it will be sacrificed if you don't pay the Echo cost. When it enters the battlefield, return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So it both triggers a flicker effect, and it also sort of cheats that particular creature's mana cost, because you might be paying 5 mana for Karmic Guide, but not only are you getting a 2/2 flyer, you're also getting maybe an 8 or a 9 cost from your graveyard as well. So that's pretty awesome. Kissing Cagebreakers is a 5-cost 3/4. Whenever it attacks, put a 2/2 token on a battlefield tapped and attacking for each creature card in your graveyard. Now, if this guy happens to stay alive, you might start getting a lot of tokens on the field, which is good again, because Commander is a pretty token-heavy format. So you're going to get a lot of 2/2 wolf tokens. If this guy keeps attacking, you might have 8 to 9 creature cards in your graveyard. Mitotic Slime is a very good value card. 5-cost 4/4. When it dies, put 2/2 ooze tokens on the battlefield, and then once they die, you put 2/1/1 tokens for each of those tokens. So essentially, even if you cast Mitotic Slime once, you're going to have a lot of tokens, and you can keep recasting it to keep abusing the effects of these tokens, where they just keep sticking around. It's a very, very sticky creature that creates very sticky tokens. Shriekmaw is when it enters battlefield, destroy target non-artifact, non-battle creature. Nice creature removal, and its evoke cost is definitely very useful. Thragtusk is a 5-cost 5/3. When it enters battlefield, you gain 5 life, and when it leaves the battlefield, put a 3/3 beast token on the battlefield. This is one of those cards, again, where you're going to want to keep casting it over and over, because not only do you get its enter the battlefield effect of gaining 5 life, but you get its sort of sticky ability where it leaves behind a 3/3 token, and you can sort of abuse that by just keep recasting it and keep recasting it. And then we get into the higher cost minions here. So Armada Worm is pretty high cost in terms of the colors. It's a 2 colors, 2 green, 2 white, 5/5 trample. And when it enters the battlefield, put a 5/5 creature token with trample onto the battlefield. Again, you can sort of abuse this by flickering it. It might be pretty high cost in terms of casting it from your graveyard again, but if you have something like Conjurer's Closet on the field, and that is sort of a bombshell in this deck, if you manage to play it, then you can keep getting these 5/5 tokens with trample out onto the battlefield. Brutalizer Exarch, 6-cost 3/3, but when it enters battlefield, you can either tuck a non-creature permanent, or search library, or tutor for a creature card, essentially. So this, again, you can abuse with its flicker effect, where you can either keep tutoring for certain creature cards, or you can actually keep sort of removing certain things on the field that are either indestructible or yeah, basically, essentially anything that's like indestructible where it's causing a lot of issues. Grave Titan is pretty much black good stuff at its best. 6-cost 6/6 Death Touch. When it enters battlefield or attacks, put 2/2/2 zombie tokens on the battlefield. Again, you can flicker it to keep putting those 2/2/2 zombies, but otherwise it's a 6/6 Death Touch body, and that's just amazing either way. And then we have Harvester of Souls for card draw, essentially. So it's a 6-cost 5/5 with Death Touch, but whenever a non-token creature dies, and again, you're going to have a lot of creatures that might be able to trigger this a lot, you may draw a card. So it's a lot of card draw, in addition to being a 5/5 Death Touch body, which is pretty amazing. Nemesis of Mortals, I believe I already went over this pretty much, but it's essentially a 5/5 that costs 1 less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard, and you can Monstrosity for 5 for the same ability. So essentially, its Monstrosity ability should only cast you about 2 green, so if you actually cast this without paying the colorless, you're paying 2 green, and then you're monsterifying it for another 2 green, so you're paying 4 green to have a 10/10 creature on the battlefield, which is pretty amazing. Now again, combo this with something like a Brawn or like a Nilia, God of the Hunt, and you have a 10/10 trample, which is even more scary. Nisian Wild's Ravager is a 6-cost 6/6 with Tribute 6. So when it enters the battlefield, if the tribute wasn't paid, which it's tribute 6, so it would be a 12/12 if the tribute is paid, you may have Nessian Wild's Ravager fight another target creature. Now, the way the tribute works is that you choose an opponent, and if you have an opponent that's sort of on your side for the moment, you can get that opponent to essentially do what you want. So let's say there is a nasty creature on the board that nobody really wants to deal with, or like you don't have any sort of removal in your hand. The not paying a tribute, where you choose an opponent, say, hey, can you not pay this tribute so this thing can fight this creature and kill it, you can do that. Otherwise, if you have sort of allies with somebody, you can say, hey, can you pay this tribute so I can get this power spike going, so I can sort of start owning the board with a 12/12. You can do that as well. So the tribute kind of helps with working the politics of the board. Not helps, but it gets you to work the politics of the board a little bit, where ideally you should be able to choose whether the tribute is paid or not, and essentially work this card to your advantage. Reaper from the Abyss is a 6-cost 6/6 flyer, pretty heavy on the black cost, but flying with Morbid, essentially, which is destroy target non-demon creature. Now, the reason I included this is because not only is it black good stuff, it's fantastic for 6 mana by itself, but also because you're going to have a lot of sacrifice effects as well. You know, echo costs, stuff like that. Maybe have like these small guys that still have these sacrifice into ramp effects, where you're pretty much going to have a creature dying every turn, and that's that's at the beginning of each end step. So your opponents are also going to be having a lot of creatures die. Now, Reaper from the Abyss does receive a lot of hate, but you should still be able to proc his Morbid at least once when he's on the field. But otherwise, just a very, very strong creature. Soul of the Harvest, 6-cost 6/6 trample. Whenever he's basically good for card draw, where whenever another non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may draw a card. So again, you're going to be able to flicker a lot of creatures either through Conjurer's Closet or just recasting from Karador. Sun Titan, you pretty much have to include him in this deck. 6/6 for 6 vigilance, and when it enters battlefield or attacks, you may return target permanent card with converted mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. So, target permanent card is anything besides instants and sorcery, so that's not going to be an issue. And there's going to be enough cards that have 3 CMC or below. You know, either these guys, the rampy type of guys, or even just a land or something if you really are short on creatures for some reason, where you'll definitely get good values from Sun Titan. So Sunblast Angel is essentially a board wipe that you can abuse by flickering it. 6-cost 4/5 flyer. When it enters battlefield, destroy all tapped creatures. Now, ideally, you play this on your turn once your opponents have all attacked, meaning that all of their creatures are tapped and yours aren't. But you can then recast her from your graveyard to sort of find the perfect scenario where you can destroy all of your opponent's creatures and not your own where they are tapped. Or you can keep attacking with your creatures, have them all be tapped, and still destroy them to get them into your graveyard so you can either ramp into your commander or just have some sort of effect there. And then Wormcoil Engine, the classic 6/6 for 6 colorless, which is incredibly cheap. Death Touch Lifelink. When it does, put a 3/3 colorless token and a 3/3 colorless token that each have, not each, but one has Death Touch, one has Lifelink. And you can abuse this by recasting it again and having these tokens just keep spawning to always have some sort of Death Touch Lifelink type of board presence. And then we have Angel of Despair. A 7-cost, actually, a 5/5 flyer. When it enters the battlefield, destroy target permanent. So it really targets any sort of creature, non-creature permanent. The downside to Angel of Despair is that she's very high costing, both in her actual cost, in her actual converted mana cost, and her color cost, because this deck is primarily sort of green-black focused, so to be able to combine your white mana and your black mana might be a little difficult for the deck, but I wanted to throw her in anyway because you can abuse her into the battlefield effect. Hornet Queen is another one that you can abuse the enter the battlefield effect. 7-cost 2/2 flyer with Death Touch, and when it enters the battlefield, put 4 1/1 tokens with Death Touch on the battlefield. So, this card is going to, you know, if you've Conjurer's Closet out with a Hornet Queen and nobody has a board wipe, you're going to start making a very strong defense of Death Touch creatures. She is absolutely ridiculous, and she's not a problem in terms of colors because again the deck is majority green, so you shouldn't have too many issues casting the 3 green cost. Illuminate Primordial is another card where you can abuse its enter battlefield effect. 4/7 for 7, unfortunately, is pretty high costing, but still worth it. Vigilance, when it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, exile up to 1 target creature that player controls, and that player gains life equal to its power. So it's essentially a Swords to Plowshares for each opponent, and but the thing is, you can keep flickering him to essentially rid your opponents of creatures, where it gets run indestructible and stuff like that. So that's definitely a must-have card for the deck. Mere Battlesphere, another thing that you can abuse is Flicker effect. 7 colorless cost, 4/7. When it enters battlefield, put 4 1/1 tokens on the battlefield, and then additionally, you can tap them to give Mere Battlesphere extra power and basically burn defending player. Now, basically, you can keep abusing it to keep putting tokens into play, which then you can then tap to give it a bunch of, deal a bunch of damage and give it a bunch of power. Overseer of the Damned, 7 cost 5/5. When it enters the battlefield, it may destroy target creatures, so nice creature removal. Whenever a non-token creature an opponent controls dies, put a 2/2 black zombie creature token on the battlefield tapped. So this is a very good creature, something that you can keep flickering for its effect, get a bunch of 2/2 tokens, and additionally, you know, if you have any sort of death touch type of creature on the field, Hornet Queen, something like that, Harvester of Souls, whatever, and if you're going to have a bunch of creatures dying, then this is definitely going to give you more value as well with the 2/2 zombies. Sunset Mastodon, another thing you can abuse its flicker. 7 cost 5/5 reach, so a little bit of defense against flying as well. When it enters the battlefield, bolster 5. So nice muscle card here. Something that will give your creatures just a lot of toughness with the 5/1/1 counter, so that's pretty good as well. Sepulchral Primordial, you can again flicker it. 7 cost 5/4 Intimidate. When it enters the battlefield, for each opponent, you may put up to 1 target creature card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. So you're stealing super expensive cards because EDH is full of super expensive cards, and you can keep doing this multiple times. If you have something like a Conjurer's Closet, you can keep recasting it using Karador, and you're going to get a lot of creatures on the battlefield with this card. Sylvan Primordial, 7 cost 6/8 with Reach. Again, another card that can defend against flying. When it enters battlefield, for each opponent, destroy target non-creature permanent that player controls, and for each permanent destroyed this way, search the library for a forest card, put that card on the battlefield tapped. So very rampy, nice non-creature removal, and Reach. So very valuable card in that respect. Tornado Elemental, 7 cost 6/6. When it enters the battlefield, it deals 6 damage to each creature with flying, so a nice board wipe for flyers because there are very few flyers in this deck, but otherwise you can assign Tornado Elemental's damage as though it weren't blocked. So it essentially has Intimidate. I don't know why anybody would block a Tornado Elemental because it would be pointless. So more defense against flying, and then a nice way of getting its damage through as well. And finally, move on to the most expensive cards in the deck, not monetarily, but in terms of mana cost. Avatar of Woe is actually pretty cheap. If there are 10 or more creature cards total in all graveyards, which there definitely will be, I mean, there's going to be more than 10 creature cards alone in your deck. Avatar of Woe is going to cost 6 colorless less to cast, so only 2 black. Only 2 black if this ability is procced. It has Fear, meaning that you can get its damage through very easily, but you can tap it to destroy target creature. So nice removal, very cheap, nice body on the board, a nice Fear ability to get your damage through, but also a nice ability to remove creatures if something terrifying is on the board. Ghoul Tree is another card that actually should cost hardly anything, perhaps 1 green, where Ghoul Tree will cost 1 colorless less to cast for each creature card in your graveyard. So you might have 6 to 10 creature cards in your graveyards. All of a sudden you're paying 1 green mana to have a 10/10 on the board, and that is insane. That's just a must-have for this deck. Terastodon is something that you can sort of abuse its flicker ability. It costs 9/9. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy up to 3 target non-creature permanents, so it's nice removal in that regard. For each permanent put into a graveyard this way, its controller puts a 3/3 green elephant creature onto the battlefield. So it's nice removal, but you're sort of giving your opponents 3/3s. But also, if you really want to sort of close out the game with a bunch of tokens, you can actually sort of destroy your own lands when it comes into play, and sort of close out the game with those additional 3/3s. So if you play it and destroy your own land, you're getting essentially an 18/18 for 8, which isn't bad, obviously, without the land destruction, but decent creature nonetheless. And then Woodfall Primus, and it costs 6/6 for 3 green with trample, and then when it enters the battlefield, destroy target non-creature permanent. So again, another more non-creature removal, and it has persist as well. So not only does it sort of come back, but then when it finally actually dies, you can then recast it again to still have the persist effect. So Woodfall Primus is very, very sticky, nice removal as well too with trample, so its damage can get through. So that was my budget Karador deck. Again, this deck is about $80, and you can immediately cut $10 off that if you want to disinclude or take out Wormcoil Engine to have a nice sort of budget $70 deck. It's not as cheap as like the Commander 2014 decks, but it's definitely better than the decks out there that you might see on Tapped Out that are $200 to $300. So I like to keep things nice and close to what a consumer would be willing to pay in terms of an EDH deck. And Karador himself is about $6, but he's definitely worth the investment because he can be used for many different sort of deck types. You can make dredge decks. This deck in particular happens to be very creature heavy, where you just sort of beat down with extra utility thrown in there. And that's pretty much it. So if you guys like the deck, feel free to leave a rating on the video, leave suggestions for if you spot an opportunity for a card that would work really well within the deck that I might have forgotten. And that's pretty much it. So thank you all for watching, and I'll see you guys later.